No. Inside Cromwell Street.
I am Anna Marie Kathleen Daisy West. I am the eldest daughter of Frederick Walter Stephen West and Catherine Bernadette Costello West. And I'm trying to explain my life and my upbringing at 25 Midland Road and 25 Cromwell Street, and maybe help you understand that things don't always seem to be as they are behind closed doors. There was myself, Charmaine, Heather and Rosemary. Like I say, Dad was a bit busy at the time, and when we moved from Midland Road, we moved to Cromwell Street, which was just directly the other side of the park. I remember going there and it was such a big house, all this space, and out in the garden there was a cooking apple tree, an apple tree, pear tree, like an orchard, like a little orchard. With my dad, he was very much compulsive liar. My dad would lie so much that he would believe it. I remember the time he told the children that he'd invented a television, and they were adamant that my dad invented the television. And I thought, you know, strange, in the video recording. With my dad, it's a case of you'd listen to what he'd say, and then if you cut it in half and then half again, you were somewhere near the truth. I helped Dad do the living room, the extension of Cromwell Street, mixed up the gravel, the cement, and laid the floors down. It was very, very strange because I remember one time we were all in bed and we had the living room was partitioned, because it was 18 foot by 18 foot, so it was a large one. And the basements were being used as a playroom then, the children. And Dad came and woke me up and he said, "Oh, we're just popping out. You know, we won't be long." And sort of looking back, I mean, I didn't think anything of it. Rosemary, when she used to get angry, she'd literally froth at the mouth. You know, her eyes would go, well, as if lights on but no one's in. There'd be a blank expression. She would actually have a blind rage. I mean, she's stabbed me in the arm with a knife. She'd hit you with whatever is there. I remember the one time she hit Stephen and she hit him so hard with the brush it broke in half. And then the next breath she'd be really nice. Rosemary asked me to stay home from school one time. She was really agitated about something. She'd upset Dad. And I'm not sure what it was about, not even to this day do I know. And she was really nice to me all day, and I thought, oh, because with Rosemary, she didn't give affection, you had to earn it. I stayed home, and Dad came home from work. He came in and he started shouting at Rosemary. And I said, "Come on, Dad, leave her alone." Right. And he turned around, he said, "Oh, you're trying to come big and hard, are you?" He said, "I'm the one that runs this house." And he promptly pulled my head down, put my head down on the floor, And he'd just come in from work. He had steel toe-cap boots on, and he kicked me in the mouth. And I got up, and Rosemary turned around and looked at me and said, "That'll serve you right." I stood there laughing at me, and I just couldn't believe what was happening, what was going on. It's beyond me. Cromwell Street, worst memory that I have from there is when I was 8, and I was told to go down into the basement. And as I walked down, Rosemary and my dad were walking behind. And as I entered the room, there was instruments on the floor. And I said, I don't want to come down here, I don't like it. I got told to shut up. And Rosemary ripped all my clothes off me. And I was made to lie on the floor. And I was very frightened. And I was asking, "What's that for? What are you going to do with that?" And I got told to shut up. And I started screaming. And Rosemary sat on my face, on top of me. And I remember feeling this awful pain inside me. And I was panicking because I couldn't breathe, and I was gagged. They put a ripped sheet in across my mouth and tied it at the back, and then they put some, I would know it is black carpet tape, across my mouth. And I was just so frightened, and it just hurt so much. And Dad said to me that what they were doing, all fathers do it, and it would make me a better person and a good mother. And I shouldn't complain. I should be thankful that they're good parents to me to do this to help me. And I was tied to a metal contraption. And I was just thinking, oh, I wish I could die. It just hurt so much. And then I thought, well, Dad's told me that this is to be done, and stop making a big fuss. And it just seemed, I was left downstairs, tied up, when the door went. Downstairs is soundproof. I just wanted to be over and done with. And Rose came down and she ridiculed me, and she had very, very long nails at the time. And she scratched all my chest, and I was bleeding. And then afterwards, they untied me and took me into the bathroom, and I had to wash, and I was so sore, I was bleeding. And I had to basically say thanks to Dad for helping me. And that's why a lot of the times I go with Dad, building work. Because it was our little secret. not to tell Rose. He'd sometimes give me £1 to go to the shop, but I was never allowed to tell her. And then he'd always say afterwards, "Oh, I'm sorry, love, I love you." And I just kept thinking in my mind how lucky I am to have such good parents that would spend that time, that would help me. Once a year, we would have what was known in the family as the yearly beatings, where we'd be hit with a buckle of belts, we'd have our clothes ripped off us, and Rose would punch and scratch and kick and hit us with anything that was at hand. My brother was told to stay home from school, and when I come home from school later on, he'd been tied to the toilet seat in the bathroom, and when I looked at him, I didn't recognise his face. He'd been so much hurt, and she'd whipped him. And we were always told that it was for our own good, to teach us to be better and to have respect for people. And when the one time I had to stand in front of my dad, after Rose had hit me, I had marks on my neck where she had grabbed me, and nearly choked me because she grabbed my throat and twisted the skin round, and I couldn't breathe. And my dad turned round to my stepmother and said, "If you're going to hit the children, make sure it doesn't show." Whenever I approached my father about the abuse that was happening to myself, my father would say, "Well, every family, every child are going through the same thing. You're making a fuss about nothing. It's for your own good. We're trying to help you and bring you up correctly, and that I shouldn't keep going on about it because nobody else does." And I remember I'd go to school and I'd see other children and I'd look at them, they'd be playing happy, and I just think, they do seem all right. Well, maybe I am just making a fuss about nothing. So then after that I kept quiet, and the only other time that the abuse was mentioned was when I was at St Paul's school, primary school, and Rose used to hit me and would mark me, and I was always told that I mustn't do PE. Well, this one time the teacher said, "No, you are," and made me, and she must have noticed the marks on my body, because when I got home from school there was a knock at the door, and it was a welfare worker, and she came in and Rose was there, and I had to make them a cup of tea, and they were talking, and then when she left I had the biggest hiding of my life from Rosemary. My stepmother, she cherished the home at 25 Cromwell Street. That was her everything. She would talk to my dad a lot. They were at times inseparable. And looking back now, when I was growing up, there was a lot of whispering and talking and planning and a lot of closed doors. They must have had a hold over each other. When I was 13, my stepmother said to me on one occasion that I was going to go out for a drink with her. By this time, I was also having to entertain gentlemen that come to the house. I remember she helped me put some makeup on. We went out to a pub just outside of Gloucester. Come the end of the evening, I remember being drunk. I couldn't walk straight, I couldn't see properly. And earlier on in the evening, I'd turn around to sort of talking to Rosemary, and she said, oh, you know, we'd be like mates, we'd go out together and do things together. And I thought, well, that'd be nice. Suddenly Dad appeared in the van, and he got out, and then Rosemary just turned on me. She said, you think I'm going to be your effing friend or mate? She said, well, you got another thing coming. And she pulled me into the van by my hair, and she was hitting me and punching me, and I was crying. I was confused. I didn't have my faculties with me fully, and she was ripping my clothes off me, and then she tied my hands up and sexually assaulted me. My dad was in the back of the van to start with, and then he got in the front and was driving, and she was ridiculing me and laughing and punching and poking at me and saying horrible things to me. When we got back home, I was covered in blood, and I was told that I had to go into the bathroom and clean myself up. And I had to come out and just stand there in front of them. And she was just laughing at me. I just wanted to go to bed. And just want to go to sleep and just think it was a dream. I think it was a horrible dream. When I was 13, I was introduced to prostitution by my stepmother, Rosemary. Coloured men would come to the house at various times. I remember the first time when I had to go to bed with one of these gentlemen. I was undressed by my stepmother, and my father was in the room. It was a separate room. I was led into what we used to call my stepmother's best room. And in this room there was a double bed, a cabinet with drinks, there was a fur carpet on the floor and a lamp. There was a gentleman in there. The gentleman had sexual intercourse with me. I was then told to leave the room. And I had to sit down. I wasn't allowed to wash or get dressed. I had to wait for Rosemary to finish. Relationships with these gentlemen went on until I ran away from home at 15. I remember a particular time this gentleman, he called and he said that he didn't want to do business with my stepmother, he wanted to see me. And he'd bought some chocolates and he gave them to me and he said, "They are left there for you." And Rosemary was as nice as anything. Then when he left, she took the chocolates and said that I wasn't having them. They were hers, and she sat down and she ate them all in front of me. I didn't want chocolates. This man was nice. He tried to think of my feelings and tried not to hurt me. I was just trying to get somebody to love me. I'm not proud of what I've done. I suppose deep down, I don't believe my children will be proud of me. That's my one worst fear, is that my children won't respect me. When my father was arrested, I was getting the children ready for school. And the telephone rang and I answered it, and it was my stepmother Rosemary. And she said to me that if I thought anything of my dad, then I'd keep my mouth shut. And I'd put the phone down, and it was a matter of minutes. There was a knock at the door, and there was a policewoman, Hazel Savage, was at the door with a policeman. She said that she came to see me because of a remark that was made to somebody from the younger children, saying, "Oh, we don't want to end up like Heather under the patio in the garden." And I said, "Well, yes, Dad had said on numerous occasions, where do you think Heather is? In the garden under the patio?" And she said, "Well, there is a big possibility that we are going to be digging up the garden from the patio." And the following day, she came back and said that Dad had been charged with the disappearance of my sister.
Geralmente as vítimas que estén aqui.
Oi, este é o endereço da Casa dos Horrores.
I said the 7 bodies earlier, they're behind 3 from there, 4 from there.
On the 24th of February, I was actually entertaining my daughter, my youngest daughter. It was her birthday, and I had, I must have about 15 school children in the house doing a party, and the teacher was there, and the telephone rang. I answered it, and then there was a policewoman on the phone. She said, "Oh," asked me, "Is that Anna Marie?" I said, yes. She said, well, I'm phoning to tell you that we've just found your sister's body in the garden. And it was really hard because I had children there. And I was totally shocked. I just dropped the telephone. And I went into the bathroom. I can't believe, I can't have heard this. It's not true. It's not happening. And I carried on with the party. And then when they went, I just sat there. And I was absolutely dumbstruck with it all. I thought, and the fact, I think, that they telephoned me, it seemed so insensitive. And what hurt the most was the fact that Heather had asked me if she could live with me. And I said no, because I was concerned that my stepmother and father would come and get her and she'd end up being hit. And I thought I was doing right. I was trying to protect her. But you never ever think that your family would do anything like that. We grew up with being hit and told off and verbally and physically abused. So it was just normal. It was a normal thing for us. When it first all came out, people would nudge and stare and look at me. And people would look down or away and wouldn't speak to me. And they made me feel as if I had done something. And I remember somebody came up to me and said, "You're lucky to be alive. You're lucky you're here. What about all the other people?" And I'm not lucky. I don't feel lucky. I feel really guilty. I feel ashamed about the fact that I'm here. But the thing is, people don't realise that when I was 15, I actually ran away from home. I did it in the middle of the night. From when I was 8 up until then, there was so much that happened. And the last thing was the fact that I was pregnant off of my father. And I was so ill, I had to have some of my insides removed because it was an ectopic. And at the hospital, nobody said anything. Nobody inquired about how I'm a 15-year-old girl was pregnant. So I don't know what my father and my stepmother said, but I remember when I was in hospital, I woke up and I had a drip in my arm and metal clips below. And I was so frightened and nobody talked to me. And I was in hospital for a week on my own. Nobody came and visited me. My one friend did, from school. And when I went home, I was allowed to go home, my stepmother, she lost her temper quite frequently on sometimes just the slightest thing. On this particular day, my stepmother kicked me in the stomach. I'd only been home about a week. And I just hit the floor, the pain. And I ran out of the room and I ran upstairs. And I stayed up there all day. I couldn't come out. And then it was about 4 o'clock and my father came home from work. He came up and knocked on the door and he told me to get out and get downstairs and to apologise to my stepmother for upsetting her. And I vowed from that day that, I'm sorry to say this, but I couldn't protect the children anymore. The day I heard about Charmaine's remains being found, it was from the television, and They showed a picture of Charmaine. And I remember I was staring at the television because I remembered Charmaine, but I had no photographs of my sister. And the photo they showed of Charmaine, she was a little toddler and she was so pretty. She was beautiful. I remember just looking, staring. And it was when each victim was found, it started to become, I was just cutting off. I just couldn't believe what was happening. I remember looking and thinking, this is something that you hear about or read in America. You don't normally hear from a little town. And seeing pictures of my dad on the telly, I thought, that's not my dad. That's not happening. My dad's a good person. And I asked the police if I could actually go to see the house where Charmaine was, because I wanted to put some flowers down. So the police checked that it was clear and they took me down in the evening. I was told that I couldn't go to any other part of the house but the part that they found Charmaine. And I remember looking at the house and thinking, it hasn't changed. It still looks the same. And I went round the back and up some steps. And to my right, there was the window that I remember me and Charmaine huddling down together, thinking that the witches were coming after us. And I walked in to what is now a kitchen. And there was a big hole on the floor. And I remember looking down, and there was earth. A friend, a very good friend, went with me, and he had to steady me because my legs just buckled. Just couldn't. I was there. I was witnessing something, but I couldn't really see it. With my mother and sister Charmaine, I wanted them to be together. So I asked permission if I could have them cremated placed in the same coffin. To start with, it was a lot of red tape I came up against because of Charmaine being a certain age, because the law says that a baby can be put to rest with their mother. But because of the events of the circumstances of how they came to die, I was actually granted permission to have them placed in the same coffin. I told my father that I was dealing with my sister's funeral, and my father, he became very angry and annoyed with me, and he said to me that Charmaine was his daughter, his child, and that he wanted to deal with that. And the thing that people don't realise the most is the fact that he's more of a victim than anybody. And I remember looking at my dad thinking, how can you say that? And I sat there and I told my dad that I was going to have my sister and my mother cremated together. And Dad asked me what would I do with the remains. And I said I'm thinking of taking them back home He said no, he said, I want them to be laid in Markle. It was a family plot. And then Dad said to me that he wanted me to promise to him that when I died, I would be buried with him because he wouldn't want to be on his own. He was frightened of being on his own. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't make that promise to Dad. A lot of the times when I visited my dad, he'd be crying. And I remember Dad said the one time that he'd come home from work and there was Heather, May and Stephen out in the back garden and they were digging. And that he said that Rosemary had told them to because she wanted a fish pond. And they'd put, I think it was blue polythene or something in the hole. And he said a few days later, the hole was covered in. And he said that he mentioned to Rose, oh, what's that? And she said, oh, I changed my mind. You know, we're not going to have one. And he said that little did May, Stephen and Heather realise Heather was digging her own grave. And I just sat there in total astonishment. I mean, I wanted to, let me out. I can't cope with this. Please let me out. I had to sit there. And he'd say that Heather had been cut in half and that she'd been put in one of the large dustbins to be disposed of later. My dad asked me the last time he was alive if I would help him and stop making statements and to give him an alibi. And I didn't even think about it. I just turned around and said, no, Dad, I won't. I can't do that. And then my dad said to me, well, think about it. I said, I can't, Dad, and he was crying. And I leant across and I brushed the tears away from his cheek and I said, please don't cry, Dad. And I held his hand and I said, Dad, all that's gone on, I know that you haven't done it all. And he said no, that he hadn't. And I said, well, only he can change things, nobody else can. And he said to me, never mind, sweetheart, he said, I'll get out of here one way or the other. And then he hung himself. And I feel really bad about that. But I couldn't. There's been too many lies. This is where my mother was found buried. I have come out to this location a few times. Never ever forget you. I know there's part of you in my heart. That's something that nobody will be able to take away from me. Trying to be a good man because I know you were. I just don't understand why. After the police had finished their inquiries at Cromwell Street, each of the children, not the children that were in care, but each of the children were asked if there was things that they wanted, belongings that they wanted from the home, because Cromwell Street, all that's there is a shell. There is nothing inside at all, no furnishings. We were all asked if we wanted to go to where the items of 25 Cromwell Street were stored, if there was anything that we felt that belonged to us. I said yes, I would like to go. And I remember as they opened these two big metal doors, I remember standing there and looking at the contents and feeling saddened, because what was in this room was 30 years of my life. My growing up, my past, my childhood. It's there. And I was looking at it thinking, there's nothing of any consequence. There was items in there that caused me to shudder somewhat because of the bad memories. If anybody had gone in there, they would have thought, well, these are items for a jumble sale. And I didn't feel that I'd achieved anything. That it was just bits and pieces. I attended the court hearings with my father and my stepmother on numerous occasions. I remember the first time I went into the court, they brought my stepmother up from downstairs first. Then my father came up and there were some police women, prison officers were with next to my stepmother, and my father was stood up and he was looking at Rosemary, and she did glance at him, and he leant forward to touch her, and I heard him say, "How are you, Rosemary?" And she completely ignored him. And then the officers intervened, and Dad was crying because she just turned her back on him. I was so close to my father and stepmother. I could have reached out and actually touched them. That's how close I was. I was sat there and I couldn't believe the people that were stood in the dock. I knew, not just as friends, but actually knew them as being my father and stepmother. I remember I went to stand up and I couldn't, my legs just gave way. And when we had to stand up for the judge to leave the room, I was physically being held up under my arms by police officers that attended with me, because I just couldn't stand, my legs had just completely gone. My dad said to me that Rosemary had killed Charmaine and put her in a septic tank, because I remember there was a garage at the back of the house, and somebody was wanting to lease the garage, so it had to be tidied out. And Dad said that Rose became quite agitated, and he sort of said, "Oh, what's up with you, woman?" And she then said that Charmaine was in there, and that he would have to help, he'd have to help dispose of Charmaine. He said that he didn't have any involvement with Charmaine, and he did say that it was Rosemary that had done it. I believe the only reason that I'm here is because I was a coward. I never stood up to them. I never rebelled. I always did as I was told. I wish deep down that I hadn't been so gutless, that I stood my ground. I love my dad a lot, and my dad would say to me that these things were happening to make me a better person, and that he loved me and he wouldn't hurt me, and that Rosemary loved me in her own way. I stayed there because my younger brothers and sisters would get hit, and I would shield them. I would stand in front and take the punishment for them.
I've got some of the artwork that I said I was going to show you, and it's just a rough cover so far, and like I told you before, we suggested Out of the Shadows.
My children are very young. They don't understand what's going on and what all the upheaval is about and why. When my children get older and they feel that they maybe are old enough to understand or to hear some of the things that went on in my childhood, with a book being there, it's the nearest that I can give them to the truth. And people have said how lucky I am. I don't feel lucky. I try to focus on what's happening. And people ridicule me. They point at me. They say things about me. But yet nobody will come to see me as a person. They think I'm going to be like my dad. When, if anybody has come to me, they've said, "Well, you're not like that." And I think, like what? What am I supposed to be like? I'm me. I can only be me. But people automatically think that I'm going to attack them or I'm going to hurt them. And the worst thing is that when I'm out with my children and I'm uptown, the people are stopping and pointing at me, and I got my girls with me, and I think, can't you just stop and think how we're feeling? We've lost a lot of things. Yes, that was my dad, he done that. I admit, we know that. But please try to give me a chance. I've lost my life. Since all this has come, I've lost my life. I'm getting to where I don't know who I am. If you have any kind of feelings or suspicions about wrongdoings, then please be one of those nosy neighbours, not so much for you, yourself, but to children who may be suffering. Give them a chance.
If you need help concerning sexual abuse, ring the Sexual Abuse Helpline on 0121 633 0077. Lines are open until 1 a.m. If you're concerned about someone who's missing, ring the National Missing Persons Charity Helpline. It's open 24 hours a day on 0500 700 700.